The next witness we intend to call is going to appear by Zoom.
What's the name of the witness?
Dr. Mark Rubino.
I'm not screen sharing. Okay, so he can just put it up there. I don't need to do anything.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Just take this back.
I don't know if he's logged in yet or not, but we're trying to communicate to make sure that is. He's in the waiting room, as I understand.
Is the individual that's on the screen with Mark Rubino, that's the witness that you would like to call?
That's the one I'm familiar with.
Sir, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, sir. Mr. Contreras, you may inquire.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you state your name for the record, please?
Mark Patrick Rubino. R-U-B as in boy, I-N-O.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm an adult neurologist.
And if you could, Dr. Rubino, provide us with your educational background.
I graduated from high school in 1989, it was a long time ago. I entered into a 6-year BS&D program through Kent State University in Ohio and Northeastern Ohio University College of Medicine, also in Northeast Ohio. Gained my MD and my BS in 1995. And then I went to Akron City Hospital and Summa Health Systems, got my transitional residency before I went to USF in Tampa to get my neurology residency, completing that in 1999. And I've been practicing in Naples since 1999.
And so my math is less than stellar, but if you graduated from high school and began practicing, graduated high school in 1989 and began practicing in 1999, that's roughly 10 years of education?
10 years, but part of it is a 6-year BSMD. Man, college is 2 years, the BS. It's an accelerated program.
Okay. And the MD, obviously medical doctor.
Medical doctor, yes.
And what is your area of specialty?
I'm a generalist, but I've taken a particular interest in head injuries or traumatic brain injury.
And have you been practicing neurology exclusively since '99?
Yes.
And what is the nature of your practice?
Well, I have my practice is individuals referred I have a lot of Parkinson's, I have some seizures, I have some a fair amount of ADD, attention deficit disorders, and some brain injury people who I acquired over the years from seeing people from car accidents. and that's probably where I got into it, is concussions from airbags and et cetera. Fortunately, there's quite a bit of pain as well.
And have you rendered testimony in courtrooms over the course of your career?
Yes.
Specifically, have you rendered testimony regarding individuals' brain injuries?
Yes.
And how many times have you offered opinion testimony in court?
Let's see. What did I say last time? I add one to it. Like 82, I think.
82 times in a courtroom you were able to offer opinion testimony.
Yes.
And out of those 82 times, how often or what percentage of that would be testimony relating to an individual's brain injuries?
Brain injury is probably about 75% of that time, because I also testify for other neurological conditions like epilepsy, or I had one where someone had a spinal cord injury and was accused of running away from a crime when he can't walk, that kind of thing.
Okay.
I'm a neurologist.
Your Honor, I would seek to have Dr. Rubino offer opinion testimony.
Any objection?
No objection.
Doctor may offer opinion testimony.
Doctor, you were retained to evaluate and review imaging on the defendant here, Spencer Pearson, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And in the course of your being retained, what did you understand your evaluation and review to consist of? What were you asked to do?
To evaluate for evidence of brain injury due to his history of years of playing football.
And you reviewed some collateral materials in connection with that history. And what I'm getting at is you had an occasion to speak to his parents, did you not? Or his
I talked to his
father?
father, yes.
And I think you had the benefit of a psychological report prior to your retention as well, did you not?
Yeah, I read Dr. Krupp's report.
Okay. As a result of your being retained in this case, did you enter orders or prescriptions to facilitate your review of the matter?
Yes, I ordered MRI of the brain and CT PET of the brain.
Okay. And for the benefit of our judge, who's the decision maker here today, can you briefly explain what those two sets of imaging are designed to show?
MRI of the brain is going to be a test looking for structure of the brain, looking for structural abnormalities, looking for focal atrophy, looking for anything that's not quite right structurally, including white matter lesions, areas of brain damage such as what's called encephalomalacia that you'd see on MRI, or prior bleed you see on MRI, specifically a gradient echo sequence. That's different than CT PET, where it's an FDG, or fluorodeoxyglucose PET scan, and that basically a radioactive sugar is administered, and the parts of the brain that use more light up more. Now the cortex in the brain is what uses most of the sugar, so you see like a ring or two semicircles when you look at a PET scan that are pretty equal. They should be equal in their intensity because they're all using the same amount of sugar.
And if you don't see the equal amount of intensity, what does that tell you as a neurologist?
That part's not working as well because it's not utilizing sugar as much as the rest of the cortex. It must be some either dead brain or brain tissue that's not been utilized. There's been down regulation for other parts of the brain too, so that happens too. Like the amygdala, for some reason, isn't working very well. Other parts of the limbic system won't work as well either.
I want to get to your findings of the imaging of Mr. Pearson's brain in a moment, but
yes.
One of the issues in this case is Mr. Pearson's age at the time of the offense, which is 18. And,
Yes.
And in what I'll call the issue of the developing adolescent brain. Are you familiar with that science?
I am, in that adolescence or 18-year-old is immature, and one does not achieve true full maturity until about 25.
And do you know generally what the process of that development between 18 and 25 entails? What I'm getting at is the myelination, the conversion of gray matter to white matter.
Well, there's the myelination, there's pruning of neurons. It's basically the same process that you have from when you're an embryo to when it's part of the growing up process.
And that occurs up through, with the brain. 25. And in connection with the pruning, is that the process by which gray matter gets converted to white matter, or is that a separate process?
White matter, gray matter is gray matter. You lose some gray matter as you get older, and then you reestablish more connections.
And
More synapses, and that's where you get more of maturity.
And what is the effect in terms of behavior with the adolescent brain?
I mean, adolescents tend to be invincible. They think that they can't. That's why they're used in the military. The 18-year-olds get drafted because they're more willing to go than a 30-year-old. 30-year-old's going to be more likely to say no. I respect myself too much for that, or I can die. They can see that already. Where at 18, you don't really appreciate that as much, and you tend to be more impulsive and tend to do things that you wouldn't do when you're 30. I use 30 because that's even more distance.
And is there other behaviors that are associated with the adolescent brain that start to cease after development in 25, in addition to impulse control?
Well, this is not exactly my forte, so
Fair enough.
it's more enough for the psychologist.
Fair enough. Now, in terms of the review of images with Spencer Pearson, what did your review of that imaging find?
All right, his MRI showed two things. One, he had a cavum septum pellucidum.
And there's a digital court reporter, I suspect. Could you slow down and repeat that?
I will say it again, and I'll even try to spell it.
Okay.
Cavum septum pellucidum. CAVUM, septum SEPTUM, pellucidum, PELLUCIDEM.
In layman's terms, what is that condition?
Everyone, during embryogenesis of the brain, these leaflets in the midbrain, in the middle part of the hemispheres, the leaflets come together, forming the septum pellucidum. However, they can be separated from repetitive traumas. They can also be not put together in the first place, which indicates maldevelopment.
Is the maldevelopment, is that something that's detectable at a very young age?
Yes.
Okay.
That's basically going to be early, either cognitive or behavioral problems early on.
As a child?
As a child, yes.
Okay. And then the other mechanism by which that feature presents is what?
From head injury, you can get the brain injury persona of being the more easily agitated, intolerant to stress, more anxiety, some attention deficit, that type of stuff.
From the cavum septum pellucidum?
From the brain injury.
From the brain.
From the brain injury that the cavum septum pellucidum represents.
Okay. As I understand your testimony, the cavum septum pellucidum is evidence of an injury to a brain as opposed to some acute injury in and of itself?
It's not an acute injury. It doesn't happen all of a sudden. It happens gradually over time.
Okay.
And then Thank you. Go ahead.
And you said it's evidence of a brain injury. Would that be from trauma to the head?
Well, it's typically evidence of multiple head injuries. It's something you see in NFL players.
And you saw that present in Mr. Pearson, who I believe was 20 years old when you had him imaged, correct?
Correct.
So we have the evidence of hits, repetitive hits to the head. What else did you see in Mr. Pearson's imaging?
He has a lesion in his right frontal lobe, just anterior to the insular cortex and near the gray matter.
And
Given his age and location, there's not a whole lot that's going to cause that besides head injuries.
in layman's term, what's a lesion?
A lesion is going to be on flare on T2. You see a white, a bright spot in a gray area. That would be a white matter lesion.
Okay. Is that in essence a bruise to the brain?
It's a scar, actually.
Scar?
Scar. It's gliosis.
And the location of that injury in Mr. Pearson's imaging, I think you said was in the right frontal lobe on the outside?
Yes, it's towards periphery near the cortex.
Okay. And what is the significance of the location of that scar?
Well, it's a scar in the frontal lobe, which when you see damage in the frontal lobe, then you're more likely to have problems with attention, planning, consequence appreciation. Or you don't appreciate consequences. You tend to act impulsively without appreciating the consequence of your action. Planning is impaired, more so than a normal person.
What else did you discover upon the imaging, reviewing the imaging of Mr. Pearson's brain?
The other thing is going to be the PET scan.
What did that reveal?
That showed that there's diminished uptake in the cingulate gyrus, including the anterior cingulate gyrus, which is part of the limbic system.
And what does the limbic system in the human brain control or function?
The limbic system controls emotion. It's the part of the brain that emotion resides, is the limbic system.
And an injury to the limbic system, how does that manifest itself in an individual?
Typically, someone who cannot has difficulty regulating their own emotions. They have more difficulty calming themselves down. They're more likely to have anxiety and easy agitation. That's all part of the brain injury persona.
And was that the in essence the totality of your findings in terms of reviewing Mr. Pearson's imaging?
Imaging, correct.
Before we get to the physical examination.
Correct.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but these were in essence what you found in terms of abnormalities with Mr. Pearson's brain versus a typical 20-year-old?
Yeah, this is not typical. Yes, it's not a part of normal.
Hi there. I do want to just jump in real quick. We'll get you back to the courtroom in here in just a second. But at noon, if you're watching this on First Coast News Plus on your TV, we're going to switch over towards our noon show with the latest top stories here across the First Coast and, of course, our latest forecast. But if you want to continue to watch in here at the courtroom, take your controller, just hit down, and our feed will pop up right there, and you can just switch over to that other feed. If you're watching this currently on YouTube, there will will be no change. Just continue to watch it as it is. But if you are watching our main feed on our First Coast News Plus apps on your TV, make sure you push down, push over, and you'll see the latest feed there so you can continue watching here at the court case. All right, I'll get you back to the courtroom.
Due to his early development of anxiety. And, in elementary school, his grades were relatively good, but in middle school and high school, the grades turned terrible. And
Just to be clear, you haven't reviewed Mr. Pearson's transcripts or anything, have you?
no, just from what he told me, his grades were.
Okay. And I guess what I was getting at is the injuries you saw were inconsistent with, say, a cardiovascular source or some other source apart from head trauma?
Yes, his blood pressure was normal. He has no history of heart disease. He has nothing that suggests that he has any kind of reason for vascular disease. He's a non-smoker.
And therefore, your opinion is that those abnormalities or injuries are a result of head trauma?
Right. The only finding that could be from something else would be the white matter lesion, because it's non-specific. It is my opinion that it's traumatic because he's got no risk factors for vascular disease. It's in the frontal lobe near a bone, which is pretty common for white matter lesions. And I have a septum cavum pellucidum, which says this person likely suffered multiple head injuries.
Now, there's been discussion, and I may have fueled it, about whether Mr. Pearson suffered from chronic encephalopathy, CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy, if I'm saying that right. Can you diagnose that with a 20-year-old living subject?
No, we're talking about chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. And no, that cannot be diagnosed and when someone's alive. And there may be some better tests coming out that may shed light on who's going to get CTE. CTE is going to be more of a degenerative process that happens later in life, like an Alzheimer's process, but happens younger, and they get demented with worse behavior very quickly. Whether he's going to develop that or not, I don't know, but he's at increased risk of it.
Because of the findings you just discussed?
Findings he has, but he has altered behavior already from having head injuries, but I don't know if it comes to the level of calling it CTE or opining that it will go into CTE.
Are you aware of the studies regarding CTE and what I'll call overlap between the findings you're discussing here today, the cavum septum pellucidum and whatnot, and those findings being later determined to be present in post-mortem autopsies of brains of people confirmed to have CTE?
Yes, that's why we retrospectively say, hey, this is what we see in people with CTE. We can see it on MRI now. Therefore, it must be from a head injury, or the history is compatible with it.
And what was that overlap with Pearson? What were the findings you saw that is consistent with people later diagnosed with CTE?
The cavum septum pellucidum.
Evidence of repetitive head injuries.
Right.
Okay.
That's what CTE is, not from just one head injury. It's typically from multiple subconcussive injuries. And unfortunately, Spencer, playing football at 6 years old, sustained multiple subconcussive injuries, and it wasn't until high school that they took people out for concussion protocols. When he was in grade school and middle school, according to his dad, there wasn't any supervision. They just basically hit their heads all the time, and no one thought anything of it.
Now, you also physically examined Mr. Pearson, did you not?
I did.
And what did you find in terms of that examination?
Let's see, the first thing I did, I checked his blood pressure first and checked his pulse. Blood pressure was 120/80, pulse was 96. I did a Montreal cognitive assessment.
And to be clear, Mr. Pearson was cognitively intact, was he not?
Yeah, he scored a 20 out of 30. He's cognitively intact, but unfortunately MOCA does not assess behavior and emotion. It's more of a dementia test.
What does that mean? That he's cognitively intact, but the instrument doesn't assess behavior and emotion?
That he should be able to, well, obviously appreciates everything that happened here, appreciates what he did. He can, I mean, he really shouldn't have any problem like following directions and stuff like that.
But in terms of behavior, that may be impaired for the reasons you discussed?
Right, the other non-cognitive aspects of head injury, which is easily agitated, anxiety, poor planning, unregulated emotion, difficulty controlling one's emotions, acting out on emotion, that type of thing.
Okay. And I interrupted. What else did your physical examination reveal?
Cranial nerves, he had a little bit of, he had nystagmus in his left eye, just his left eye, when looking to the left.
What does that tell you as a neurologist?
That there's some type of interruption in the midbrain within the what's called medial longitudinal fasciculus of the midbrain. It's just something you see in people with head injuries.
That nystagmus in the left eye is further evidence of head injuries.
Yes. Or if it's in both eyes, it could be from a bad ear. Semicircular canals being off. You get nystagmus from ears, but because it was just one eye, it couldn't have been ears. It had to be.
And in your, beyond a reasonable degree of medical probability, that's a symptom of a head injury.
Yes.
What else did you find upon examination?
I assessed his motor examination. He had full strength throughout, but he had a little bit increased tone on the left. That's when I asked him to distract him with moving his right arm, and then I passively move his left arm, and I check for resistance. There's some resistance there that he shouldn't have had. And that indicates that you get increased tone when inhibitory inputs from the cerebral cortex coming down are interrupted. Because the brain is inhibitory on tone. If you have no tone, if you have no brain, your muscles would be spastic.
Spastic meaning rigid or the contrary?
The anterior horn cell is going to be on. Anterior horn cell is always on. Anterior horn cell is what gives you your motor neuron. There's inputs from the cerebral cortex down to the anterior horn cell that keep it relaxed, and it kind of works negatively. That's why when you die, rigor mortis kicks in.
And so the rigidity, if you will, or the resistance on his left side is evidence of that condition?
Of some interruption of inhibitory inputs from the brain to the left arm.
And beyond a reasonable degree of medical probability, do you have an opinion as to the source of that finding?
Yes, so it's going to be upper motor neurons affected.
Can you say what the...
I can't say it's his brain or his spinal cord because there's evidence of spinal cord damage too.
So we'll get there. Any other findings from the motor exam or?
That was it for that.
Okay.
Then we move on to sensory, light, touch, and temperature are intact, but he's got loss of vibration sense in his ankles.
And what does that tell you?
That he has proprioceptive loss.
And what is the significance of that finding?
that he's more likely to fall in the dark. What it means is either has B12 deficiency or he's somehow affecting his dorsal column of the spinal cord.
And in layman's terms, what does that mean?
That means he's either pinching his spinal cord or he's got some kind of deficiency. So I look for other things to get evidence of what else lends itself to this, which would be his deep tendon reflexes.
And how did he exhibit on that examination?
He had pathological reflexes. He was brisk throughout his arms, and his patellas with his ankle jerks revealed unsustained or sustained clonus. Means you push his foot up, it'll keep beating back and forth.
On the way down?
On the way down, it'll go up and down by itself.
And is that irregular with somebody without some kind of physical injury?
No, you don't see it. It's pathological, without a doubt, pathological.
And
He also had a cross adductor, meaning that when I tap his patellar reflex, his legs come together. So that's a pathological spread. The reflex is supposed to be just, and when you stretch a deep tendon, the response should be limited to that same tendon. But this went up to the spinal cord and crossed over in the spinal cord and caused another reflex. That indicates another evidence of loss of input from the brain.
do you have an opinion as to what the source of those findings may be?
I think he has cervical stenosis. I think he's pinching his spinal cord. And if that's not the case, then his brain's more damaged than it's showing on MRI. But I think this is going to be his neck.
You think it's cervical stenosis or the spinal cord as it's transitioning through the neck
It's getting,
has stenosis?
it's getting pinched by something. It could be a disc herniation from one of his injuries long ago. It could be bone spurs, because of all his head injuries, people with head injuries tend to have crappy necks. They tend to have more bone spurs, more disc herniations, and more other problems.
And I don't mean to be overly simplistic. Is that because, in essence, the head bone's connected to the neck bone?
The head bone's connected to the neck bone, yes, so they're connected.
So if there's injuries to the head, that's going to transition therefrom down the neck?
Right. For example, in a car accident, if someone gets airbag deployment, EMS will put them in a neck brace on a board. Because if you have a head injury, you're more likely to have a cervical fracture or some problem with your neck, because they're very integral when you get injured.
Integral meaning connected.
They're connected. They're very much connected.
Now, is there a medical procedure or treatment that Mr. Pearson could undergo to repair or try to ameliorate the effects of that cervical stenosis?
Well, first you would need to have an MRI of his cervical spine to see what level it is and what needs to be done. And if it's not cervical, you have to look at thoracic. But this looks like it can be cervical.
And generally, go ahead.
Because the arms are also increased reflexes.
Which would indicate a cervical injury.
They indicate there's going to be high cervical.
Is there a medical procedure that could help repair or at least ameliorate the effects of that? Well, let me back up. Is that something that deteriorates over time, cervical stenosis?
It gets worse over time. My opinion with him is he needs an MRI pretty quickly and needs to see a surgeon pretty quickly.
So there is a surgical...
Yes, surgery would decompress. This would be anterior cervical. This would be anterior cervical discectomy with fusion. Now they're doing arthroplasties or arthrodesis, which is putting the artificial discs in. It all depends on the pathology that's present on the MRI.
And unfortunately, when you were retained and the orders were entered, it didn't encompass a cervical spine MRI, did it?
No, it wasn't until I examined him that I saw that he had these ridiculous reflexes that further testing.
And if he doesn't get treated for that condition, what is the prognosis for Mr. Pearson moving forward?
That he would have progressive problems walking and would develop spasticity in his limbs and neuropathic pain through his legs and arms. And eventually he won't be able to walk anymore if untreated.
But surgery could remedy that.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I may have one moment here. Dr. Rubino, I don't have any further questions. Thank you. I believe the state does.
Cross-examination.
Yeah, you do.
All right, it's noon, but I'm going to say good morning, Dr. Rubino.
Good morning.
Good seeing you again.
Same
I'm just
here.
going to cover some things that council just went over with you. So first and foremost, I just want to start out, you are not a psychologist, correct?
Last time I checked, I'm not a psychologist.
All right, and when we spoke last week, you actually had said that psych isn't even in your vocabulary. You've never given an opinion. You've never given an opinion about psychology in court, correct?
Correct. Other than some psychological symptoms that arise from brain injury, such as anxiety and increased tolerance of stress, those are psychological, but I'm not a psychiatrist saying that he's got bipolar disorder, or if he's got schizophrenia or anything like that. I'm not there to say anything like that.
Of course, and when you're talking about these things that you just mentioned with counsel that would fall under the umbrella of psychology, let's say the depression, the anxiety, the behavioral issues, you're basically talking in generalities, right?
Yes.
These are things that...
In brain injury, you generally have people who are more easily agitated, poor planning, loss of appreciation of consequence, especially in the heat of the moment. These are very common, pervasive frontal lobe injury issues.
So basically these are things that you've learned through your schooling in the course of your career and reading studies on this, that these are things that are generally associated with brain injuries that you've seen on these scans. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
You don't have anything indicative or specific about Mr. Pearson's behavior that you've been able to say he definitely has anxiety, he definitely has depression, he definitely would have exerted behavioral issues because of what I saw on these scans.
Well, I read in like Dr. Kropp's and as well as Dr. Davis's that he's had anxiety since he was a kid.
Okay, so that's things that you've read in other experts on the matters reports. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay,
And as far as psychiatry, I did mention that I'm board certified by American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology, and 30% of my board is psychiatry. I'm just not a psychiatrist, and I don't opine on psychiatry.
Okay, and most of what you've testified to about those general things you would maybe expect to see from brain injuries has been through the course of your career. You've been reviewing these type of scans. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but you also said that you can't specifically correlate that to behavior, right? And I'll clarify. I think let me clarify. I think when we discussed, you had said that in order to actually make the connection specifically to someone's behavior, a psychologist would need to complete an 8-hour psychology test to better have those findings, right?
Right. A neuropsychology evaluation is helpful in determining executive function, more so than a MOCA or a psychologist.
And that wasn't performed in this case after you reviewed the scans. You didn't reach out to a neuropsychologist and have them complete that testing for your understanding. Is that right?
No, there was not a whole lot of time to do it.
Okay. And specifically when you were preparing to render or opine in regards to what you saw on the scans, you didn't review any police reports in this matter?
I didn't have any, no, I did not.
Okay, you didn't review the video footage of Mr. Spencer's behavior on June 3rd of 2023, correct?
I didn't have that either.
Okay. You didn't review any of the behavioral assessments or any type of transcripts from school where it may have talked about his general behavior as a child?
I did not.
Okay, so once again, your findings about the anxiety, the depression, you're saying generally that's what you might expect to see from these type of injuries.
Yes, but I know that he's had anxiety and depression for years.
Based
By the psychology reports.
Okay. You can't say that the violent behavior specifically on June 3rd of 2023 is from anything that you saw on those scans.
All I can say is more likely to happen because he has brain injury and more impulsive and more easily to do things without regard to consequence and do things arising out of emotion.
Okay. I want to talk to you a little bit about your time with Mr. Pearson. You became involved in this case roughly a month and a half ago, is that correct?
That's correct.
You were hired by the defense counsel in this team, or in this case, correct?
Yes.
And those 82 times that you've been able to opine an opinion regarding what you found on brain scans correlated to behavior, you've testified on behalf of the defense, correct?
Yes, I've never been retained by the state.
Okay. And I think when we spoke, you mostly said that you kind of worked in death penalty mitigation cases for defense teams. Is that correct?
Yes, that's mostly the head injury aspect of things, yes.
Okay. Now, when you actually got to meet with Mr. Pearson, you only met with Mr. Pearson one time, correct?
Yes, I did a full neurological examination one time.
Okay, and I think you started out by talking about the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, correct?
The exam part, yes. The exam part started with the MOCA, yes.
All right, and you told me that you gauged cognition, visual spaces, naming, memory, ability to pay attention, distraction, and recall in that test, correct?
That's part of MOCA, yes. Those are all within normal limits.
And you said that Mr. Pearson had a score of 28 out of 30 total, and you would consider that a normal score on that test, correct?
That is correct.
And you said next you moved to the neurological examination, or MOCA, where you said that his mental status was normal, correct?
Well, MOCA is the mental status, and they're both normal. It's the same thing.
Okay, I think you even went further to say that he was alert, he could recall words, his concentration appeared to be normal, his attention, his language, and you scored him a total of 20 out of 30 after completing that test, which you also opined was a normal score, correct?
Jim,
We're talking about the same thing.
compound question.
Rephrase your question.
Did you find that Mr. Pearson's performance on that test was also normal?
It's the same thing, so there's no also. He had a normal MOCA score, period.
Okay. I'm going to move on. Next, when we discussed it, you said that you created you did a cranial nerve assessment?
Yes.
Okay. And during that, you said that he had a little bit of jerking from his left eye, but you also felt that there was really no scale, but findings were normal. Is that correct?
Really no scale of, no, this nystagmus of one eye is abnormal.
Okay.
His eyes were abnormal. The rest of his cranial nerves were normal, but his ocular movements were abnormal with that nystagmus in his left eye, on left gaze.
Okay, and then with his motor examination you completed next, you said he exhibited no focal weaknesses, and you also found his findings to be normal. Is that correct?
His strength was normal. His tone was increased on his left side, which is abnormal.
Okay. You stated after all of your review of the scans and your physical assessment of Mr. Pearson that you would not consider Mr. Pearson's scans to be as severe as most that you have seen over the course of your career. Is that correct?
As some of the more of the cables and pleurisms I've seen that are severe, his isn't as bad as the other ones I've seen.
And you might expect to see at limited, but somewhat the same as a 20-year-old who had played football over the course of a decade of his career. Is that correct?
It seems compatible with someone who's had lots of subconcussive injuries over 12 years or 10 years.
You consider his overall performance on the testing that you performed average as compared to most of his peer group. Would that be an correct assessment?
Are we talking about the MoCA again?
Yes.
That would be average. It's just meaning he's cognitively intact.
For someone his age of normal faculties, right?
Everybody should be a normal MoCA at 20.
Okay. And earlier on direct examination, you made a statement. I want to ask you about that. You said that when you did the cognitive assessment, it appeared that he was able to appreciate what he did. He was able to appreciate his actions, correct?
After the fact, he was able to realize that he did something very bad or very wrong and feels bad about it.
And just once again, to be clear, you said on direct examination there could potentially be a correlation between his head injury and the anxiety he suffered when he was younger. But you would agree with me that you didn't see anything that would indicate that there was causation. For instance, you can't say if he didn't have the brain injuries, if he still wouldn't have suffered anxiety.
No, I just know that he had early head injuries and there was no psych history in his family. Where would the anxiety come from?
Okay, and the psych history with his family, you're meaning when you spoke with his father, what his father had told you?
Right. People in his family aren't necessarily depressed and anxious all the time. Not like he is. What separates him out? Why does he have all this anxiety as a kid?
All right, one moment, Judge. That's all I have for you, Doctor. Thank you.
Can you redirect?
Briefly. And this is just a curiosity question. Is the cavum septum pellucidum something that would get progressively worse over time, or does that get progressively worse with the continuation of repetitive head injuries?
It gets worse with a continuation of repetitive head injuries. So if he were to go on to play college and college football and NFL football, he would be pretty much guaranteed having CTE when he's 45.
But it's the repetitive injury that creates that separation between the hemispheres, as I understand that phenomenon.
Right, it's repetitive subconcussive head injuries is the risk factor that we're seeing in football players.
Okay. But in order for the separation to get larger, there needs to be the continued impacts to the head.
Right, he's not going to be doing that, not playing football anymore, so it's expected to get worse.
Now, whatever the long-term effect of his prior 12 years is, remains to be seen and likely won't be discovered until a brain autopsy.
Right. And then he's also going to get older and get a little more mature.
Because of the adolescent brain thing that we started
Right.
with. Nothing further.
Thank you. May this witness be excused?
Yes.
Doctor, you may log off. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.